Hi, and welcome to the show. You are now witnessing my proudest moment on this show, and you're going to find out why. I have with me today the executive director and founder of a nonprofit organization that assists children with special needs, learning disabilities in our classrooms to have success. She's an author, and she's very busy. I was very lucky to land this interview, and I'd like to welcome Christy Scattarella, my wife.
Wonderful to be here, Ken.
It's great to have you. Now, the Shadow Project. This is a passion of yours for many, many years, ever since I've known you.
Absolutely.
And we'll go back and talk about some history, but let's just start at the beginning. What is the Shadow Project?
The Shadow Project is a nonprofit, and our mission is to make school more accessible and engaging for children with disabilities so they can achieve their full attention and their full potential. And bottom line, what does that mean? It means let's make school a place where all kids, not just the average student, but where all kids can thrive.
Well, that's a lot to bite off. How did you come to this? What happened?
Well, my son was one of these children. My son has ADD and dyslexia, and by second grade, he was really struggling, and there were times he even felt like he could give up on school. And so came up with an idea and worked with his special ed teacher to find a way to make school more engaging and rewarding for him. And lo and behold, it suddenly became a program, and I was asked, well, what are you going to call it? I turned to my son, and he felt we should name it after his dog, and her name was Shadow.
Okay, the Shadow Project.
And that was 11,000 children ago.
Wow, 11,000 children
11,000.
in Portland and hundreds and hundreds in McMinnville.
Absolutely. It's so great because this is back to school time, and we are in 39 schools this fall, and that includes 4 schools in McMinnville. That's Memorial, Columbus, Patton, and Newby.
And we've been here many years.
Many years, yes.
And there's a few heroes to talk about, and we'll talk about one of them later. Okay. So I remember when I first got to know you, you had supplies for the program in your garage. And teachers would come by and pick them up, and you did it just on your own. It was just you.
It was, I like to think of it, the old days, as kind of a mom and pup organization.
Mom and
just
pup.
kind of me and the dog. Yes, absolutely. Well, we've changed, no longer use the garage, as you know. And we actually have an online store, and the items that are in the store are educational reinforcers that are used as part of our goal-setting program.
So these online stores where teachers go to get these supplies
Yes, they order them online, and then the Shadow Project delivers them
for
39 different schools.
Yeah, and this is something funded by foundations, private donations.
Yes, corporations, and we're really fortunate in McMinnville. We've had support from the McMinnville Education Foundation. We've had support from the Yamhill County Cultural Coalition, and also some great individual donors here have been wonderful supporters.
And the tribe Grand Ronde.
Oh my gosh, Spirit Mountain Community Fund, they are remarkable.
Okay, so that's how this sustains. And you, as executive director, you are responsible to keep that going.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're serving 1,700 kids this year. So, so the budget gets a little bit bigger every year.
Wow. Okay, I think we have a little bit of an idea. Now, the kids with learning disabilities, what does that mean? Flesh that out a little bit for us.
Okay, the number one reason a child is placed in special ed, well, first of all, 80% of kids locally and nationally who are in special ed have difficulty reading. So reading is always going to be a big issue. But the single largest reason a child is placed in special ed is for a category called a specific learning disability. And the one that we're most familiar with is dyslexia. A lot of our kids also have a communications disorder. Now, some kids have both. And an area that's really growing in the last several years, again, is Oregon, as well as nationally, is autism. And then we have a smaller percentage of children in special ed who have what's known as an intellectual disability or an emotional behavioral disorder. And again, sometimes children will have more than one disability. And so what that means, the bottom line is, it's hard sometimes to read, to write, to pay attention, and often, quite honestly, to feel like you belong in school.
Well, that's a broad spectrum of difficulties.
Yes.
And the Shadow Project manages to address these successfully. And the outcomes were incredible. I know. I've watched the studies as they've come in. How does it do that?
I would love to say it's all about us, but the reality is it's all about the fabulous teachers we have, including our amazing teachers in McMinnville. What we do is we empower teachers to support their children to be successful, because there's so much research on teacher efficacy. The effectiveness of a teacher has so much input on the outcomes of students in terms of their grades and their sense of belonging and their success in school. We want to make sure that teachers are equipped to support kids who learn differently. And so what we have that's very universal is a goal-setting program. And that is really about, in the simplest way, it's about our kids developing courage, finding the courage to keep going when they want to give up. Having the courage to persevere, even though they open a book and feel like, okay, it's time to read, but I can't read yet. What am I supposed to do? I'm looking at a jumble of words. How do I keep going? So we help teachers and kids set these small goals. And I'd like to talk a little bit about McMinnville. If we could see the slide there. Yes, we've got Jolene Heinrich. So she is a teacher who's been a huge inspiration to us. She started in Grand Haven, and she's now at Patton Middle School. And we're such a collaborative model in that we take input and ideas from teachers. And now this is a picture actually from my book. It's from The Boy Who Learned Upside Down. And really, when we talk about courage, this is what we mean. Sometimes the book and the printed word is actually an enemy of a child.
The dragon. The book is a dragon, monsters, attacking him. He's just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
But in our program, children learn something called growth mindset, which is the belief that that your brain grows, your ability grows, not just when things are going well, but through effort, through perseverance, through trying, and even when you fail. Mm-hmm. And for our kids, one of the biggest issues is giving up. And here's a reason why, and this is also from my book. And this is, my son's experience and the experience of so many other kids, that the letters will almost mock you. They will jump around the page when you try to read. Well, imagine trying to read if the letters are moving around, right? So here, in this case, they've jumped off the book and they're running down the hall, and you've got some on a skateboard and some that in ballet slippers trying to get away. And so many of our kids go, yeah, that's what it's like for me.
And this is Shadow. And Alex is imagining it at school.
Yeah, Alex is imagining his dog Shadow is out there, and she's going to fetch those runaway words and put them back on the page again for him. But so what our kids do is they work to set and meet goals, and you see a student here with a goal-setting sheet, and the idea is you set a goal, and it's something that you might be that's really important to you, but it's not necessarily an academic goal. Because we want to get used to the idea of, why do I want to accomplish this? Why is it important to me? Who are my allies? What are the strategies I'm going to take to achieve that goal? And what happens if something goes wrong? And in the end, you get to celebrate. And what happens is it helps children reframe what we used to think of failure as courage. If I try something, I make an attempt, and it doesn't work out the way I intended, I'm not a failure. I'm a courageous student, and therefore I'm more likely to try again. Reframe
and retry. So, can we go back a slide?
Sure.
There was something there, but I also wanted to finish up on our thought. Can we go back one, Paul? Now, let's hold that while we finish our thought. So, I heard you say you maybe apply this goal-setting program to something non-academic, so that it kind of removes it out of the area where they've had so much trouble.
Yes.
Into a path that they'll find success with this method.
Yes.
And then into this method, you start putting academic goals.
Absolutely. You work up. We basically reinforce students every single step of the way, and we celebrate the small milestones, and the goals get harder and harder. If you're skipping school, and we can go on to the next slide.
Well, I wanted to just say, what is that? What What's that boy doing?
He is filling out his Shadow Project goal sheet.
And the other hand?
He has his hand in kinetic sand. It's a sensory tool that we have because we're trying to provide calm and focus for a lot of our kids. And so this really helps them. I talked about regulating your behavior and your thinking. This is a tool that helps our kids regulate their behavior and thinking.
So a child with maybe ADD would have trouble sitting there reading, filling out a form.
It's hard to
focusing?
sit still for a long time. I mean, don't you feel that just at the office, right? And for kids whose bodies naturally want to do something else, it can be really difficult.
So he's got one hand in the sand helping calm him while he's doing this activity that requires him to focus. And
Absolutely.
And that is proven, shown. It's happening right here in front of us that works.
It works.
And you've got some other. Well, let's go on with the slides. Go ahead.
Sure. So how are kids reinforced? They earn shadow bucks. And this is one of our teachers here who's handing out shadow bucks. So in other words, you met your goals for the day or the week and you are earning shadow bucks, and you get to save your shadow bucks, and at the end of the month you count them up, and then you can shop at the shadow store. And you can earn things for yourself or your family. And what's great about that is it's really, kids learn to put off immediate gratification, and they really think about what they're going to earn. And the reality is, I mentioned earlier, 80% of our kids struggle with reading. For them, the printed word can be the enemy. A huge thing that our kids choose to earn in the shadow store is a book, because they are now seeing themselves as readers.
And the other thing that you've told me, and that you stock the shadow store with, is gifts for mom, gifts for dad, gifts for... It looks like we're going to have to... Well, the fire alarm went off and then went off. So that's good.
Well, that's
we
okay.
can continue the interview. We'll see what happens.
Well, I tell you, when you work in schools and special education, there's always a surprise, and you just kind of roll with the punches. So when we talk about, what does this do? What I talked about, developing that growth mindset. So here's a lovely letter from a student, telling kids, I can do it. And this is also back from the book. It's about turning I can't into I can. We hear so often, what's wrong with me? I'm stupid. Why can't I do anything right? And this is recognizing, again, your own courage. I can be successful, and I'm just as good as any other kid. And this gives them the power to persevere.
All right. What's next, Paul?
Oh, this is one of our students in McMinnville that we're just so proud of. Her name is Erica. And Erica was in the Shadow Project from kindergarten through 8th grade. She was one of Jolene Heinrich's students, and we saw Jolene a little earlier. And this is a girl who struggled a lot with reading. And despite all her struggles, she was so successful that by the end of 8th grade, in the last month of school, she read 8 books. She has a big heart. She wants to help others. You talked about earning gifts to give. Erica is a girl who always wanted to earn gifts for someone else, and she's now in high school. And what Jolene is saying is, this is a girl who actually would love to bring the Shadow Project to high school because she's so committed to helping others. So she has developed the habits that are going to serve her well for a lifetime. We have another McMinnville student. This is our kids. Also, we talk about courage. Our kids feel reading can be hard for them, so they get courage actually reading with their sensory dogs, which is great. So one of our kids in McMinnville, she graduated from middle school this year, and she was having trouble turning her homework in. She was having a lot of other issues. And she got to the point where she was passing all her classes, she got all her homework in, she was doing really good in grades, and now that young woman is on track to be the first in her family to graduate from high school.
Wow, right here in McMinnville.
Right here in McMinnville. I wanted to share one other story that really inspired me, also from a McMinnville student. So we had a teacher who wrote to us and said, I had a student at the beginning of the year, and she said, well, I don't need to learn how to read because I'm on welfare.
Oh my gosh.
And that's all I'll ever need.
Oh my gosh.
So how do you move her into the I can't into I can? Well, the Shadow Project goal setting was very effective with this girl. She was a 3rd grader. By the end of the year, not only was she reading close to grade level, she confided to her teacher, well, when I grow up, I just might want to become a nurse. So it's that shift that inspires me about these children and just inspires me to keep doing this work.
Well, that's beautiful. You've brought some examples of, what have you got there?
Well, you saw one sensory tool earlier. This was the kinetic sand, and this is another sensory tool. Now, this is called a fidget. Now, it doesn't look like much, does it?
It looks whimsical.
Whimsical. It's actually, but it is not a toy. This is a tool, and I'll tell you why. So imagine you're a Wrigley kid like this. You're sitting in class and you want to do this all day, and the teacher says, "Okay, everybody, settle down and read." If I'm like this, what do you think I'm going to do?
Panic?
Yes, that's a very good answer, because you do panic, because all my energy is trying to go into stopping me from doing the very thing my body wants to do, and then to read, which is also difficult for me. All of a sudden, what if I can channel all that extra energy and anxiety right here? I can settle down and I can focus and read, and I can tell you story after story after story where that's happened. And in fact, we created a whole library around this, and they're called super sensory literacy spaces. These are some additional services we have. We don't have them yet in McMinnville, but we're hoping to bring them out there. But a super sensory literacy space, as you see here, it's a multi-sensory compact library that we put in the special education classroom, and it's filled with books that are tailored to our kids who read a little bit differently and learn a little bit differently. So it's books they can actually read. And it's also filled with sensory tools and seating, so they get the opportunity to practice being calm and focusing and feeling like there's this safe place to build their self-regulation skills. And also, a lot of kids testing is really hard for our kids. A lot of them take their tests here.
It's kind of a safe place.
It is a safe place. I remember there was a lot of news media when this first came out, and the girl who was featured on all the TV stations picked up on, actually, after she'd been in this space, she graduated from special education, and she took all her tests in that space.
Now, when you say when this first came out, where was this developed?
2015. We developed. The Shadow Project developed supersensory literacy spaces. But again, the impetus came from our teachers, from a survey who said our children don't have the books that they need to be successful in our classroom. And then we started learning about sensory tools, and we combined the two of them to create these spaces. So not only do you have books that work for you, you have an environment that is conducive to your success. And this is another service that we offer. Now, this guy here is, believe it or not, he's reading a book.
Okay.
He is using our audio library. It's provided by a company called Learning Ally, and it's a national nonprofit, and they design an 80,000 title audio library that's for the exclusive use of children with disabilities. And you're not just reading with your ears, you're also reading with your eyes. You see on here there's pictures, and he's reading the text, and it's highlighted. He can control the speed. He can control how big the font is. He can even control the color of the highlight.
So as the words are coming to his ears, they're being highlighted on the page, so he's following along.
Yes, it's a multi-sensory input, and we do reading coaching with our kids as well. We use the whole goal-setting curriculum to support children in becoming more effective readers.
And he can go back, he can slow down, he can repeat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you talk to me a little bit? Well, do you want to talk about this picture?
I've got to talk to you about Johnny.
Okay.
Johnny is such a star. Now, Johnny is a kid who would sit in class. Now, imagine this, Ken. He would sit in class as a fifth grader every day, so afraid that someone would figure out he was only pretending to read. As Johnny put it, I felt like I was cheating. We got Johnny the audio library. We did some coaching with him. By the end of the school year, Johnny was reading close to grade level. He was even helping his mother study for his GED. He went off to middle school next year as a sixth grader.
He was helping his mother study
for her GED. He went off to middle school next year and came back with A's on his report card. And he basically is bound and determined, and everyone agrees it's going to happen. That kid's going to college. Johnny is going to college. And we see this with the reading coaching program, because it's combining assistive technology with so many of our kids need, and at the same time it's helping them with their perseverance and setting and meeting reading goals. That we did a study this year of that particular program, and we found, for example, in one school we had 18 third through fifth graders, and these kids were reading anywhere from 1.5 to 3 years below grade level. Now, if you think about that, that means like a fourth grader who's starting the year reading at maybe first or 1.4 grade level. Imagine what that must be like for him. I know for Johnny, for example, he just said he'd look at his book and it'd just be nothing but a jumble of words. Mm-hmm. So imagine what it's like for these kids. By the end of the year, they had increased on average by 1.3 grade levels, which is just unprecedented. And we have one student who even increased 2 grade levels. So we know they are capable. We know these children are capable. They just need an environment and the tools and the strategies that are tailored to the way they learn and not the way everybody else learns.
Well,
and then they become happy.
Now, who's this? Who's this in the picture?
This is a wonderful teacher. His name is Dale, and those are some of his kids. And this group of kids last year read 18,000 audio pages. And you can tell they're pretty excited about it.
Oh, that is beautiful.
Again, excited that we're here. Some of our kids use these noise-canceling headphones that keeps out the excess noise, and they're excited about sharing a book. This little gal on her right, her name is Angel. She also started using the audio library. She was also struggling with reading, and she told us, she whispered to us once, her mother came in for a workshop to learn about using the audio library at home, and she goes, you know what, even after it's lights out and I go to bed, I keep reading after bedtime, just don't tell my mom. And you can tell this is a happy reader.
Wow. Well, what's going on here?
So another thing we really try to do is we want the world to see how successful our kids can be. And so we try to bring in folks, and these are employees from Nike who came to visit a Shadow Project classroom. And I always like to put our kids in the driver's seat. Mm-hmm. And so our kids taught the Nike staff how to read with their ears using our audio library.
So they're pretty proud of themselves.
They are. Yeah, and boy, and that's a kid who, again, went from struggling with reading and some other issues to, as you can tell, total triumph.
I can. I can. Well, is that all the pictures we have?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm just dying to try one of those. May I?
You may.
So you might just be listening in class and you're playing with this.
Not playing.
Yeah, okay. You're not supposed to play with stuff while you're in class. So
No, the idea is, again, it's a tool, and that you want to, and like anything else we do with all the tools in the Shadow Project, you're taught how to use them appropriately. You're taught how to use them for calm and focus. And if you're not using them appropriately, then they're taken away because you're using them as a toy.
I see. So if you're swinging it around by the...
No.
No. It's right here. You're thinking, okay, this is helping me focus so that I can do this or I can do this.
Let me give you an example of a student named Magali. So Magali was so overwhelmed by school because she was struggling in a number of areas, and so she was often tardy. She was late for school, which, of course, just made it that much more difficult, right? Well, we provided sensory tools for her classroom and training for her teacher, and all of a sudden, Magali is coming to school every day on time. And why? It's because she suddenly had an outlet for all that anxiety. She had severe anxiety. So she had this outlet to ease her anxiety. And another thing that really caused her anxiety was reading aloud in class. For our kids, reading aloud in class is really hard because, you know what, they might not sound like the other kids. They may stumble over their words a little bit more. They may not be as fluent. But when she would squeeze the fidget, she would be able to read aloud in class. Another thing she'd never been able to do before, complete a spelling test. She struggled with spelling, but having a fidget in her hand and writing the words, she was able to start completing her spelling tests. So it was this internal transformation where she was taking all that outward anxiety and channeling it into one of these guys.
Well, Christy, I see how dedicated you are to these kids and helping them succeed. I'd like to just take a few minutes, because people watching this are, I'm sure, excited by this program. But I also want them to hear a little bit about you. You are inspirational.
No.
And just
He has to say that because we're married.
yeah. I just want you maybe to talk to us a little bit about your journey and how this has been going on for 17 years.
That long?
Yeah, I think so.
No,
Like
oh my God.
2001,
Well,
2000?
math was not my strength. So it has been a long time. We really morphed, as I say, from a mom and pup organization to now we have a staff and we have 1,700 kids, and we've been growing every single year.
And you do budgets like no one else does because they are so necessary when you're applying for grants. And
Or for anything else.
And yeah, in such detail. Now, you are a math person or not a math person?
I'm not a math person, but I've
No.
learned, just
But
like,
you've learned.
I've been inspired by our kids who try something that's difficult for them and eventually they master it. But here's the thing, Ken. What keeps me going is when we talk about, there's so much talk today about equity, diversity, and inclusion, right? And I have to tell you, for many years, when we talked about populations that were historically overlooked and had systemic barriers to success, no one ever talked about our kids who are already the kids who are left out, our kids who already are at risk because 1 in 4 in the state are chronically absent, are at risk because only 20% of children with disabilities meet the critical milestone of 3rd grade reading proficiency that predicts high school graduation. All these factors, and we're not talking that much about our kids. And it wasn't until even this year, and this is 2017, so I can't believe I'm saying this, but it wasn't until 2017, this year, that the U.S. Supreme Court overturned a lower court ruling that said educational progress for students with disabilities had to be more than de minimis. And by de minimis, that translates into too minor to merit consideration.
Just has to be above that.
Just has to be just above too minor to merit consideration. That was the standard. And yet our kids can go to college, they can lead successful lives, they can help others, they can have rewarding careers. But we need to change the communities and the states. I mean, McMinnville's wonderful, but we need to change society's expectations about what our children can accomplish. Because anything that's done within a school is great, but we need to appreciate and embrace our diverse learners. And these are kids who not only have a disability, they are disproportionately represented by communities of color, disproportionately represented by poverty, and 25% of our kids this year are from immigrant and refugee populations. So our kids are struggling with a lot of different factors that can influence their success in school by not having everything necessarily tailored to their culture or their background or their learning needs. And so it's not ever an area where you can kind of go, I'm going to take a break, because we have to keep being a champion for these children.
And you have such an example right at home. Alex came home from school and you asked him one day, how's school?
Oh, Mom, school is great. I love everything about school. I love recess, I love lunch, but there's just one thing I don't like, and that's the learning part. So anything to do with learning, he found frustrating, and, as I said, at times it made him want to give up. And unfortunately, that is true of so many of our kids, because they can have negative school experiences. We have, as I think I mentioned earlier, a lot of children are burdened by anxiety, low self-esteem, low self-image, and that low self-worth is also going to cause them to give up. And so what happens is we have children with vast potential that can get squandered.
And in Alex's case, he lived the Shadow Project.
And
he graduated.
He's still the poster child.
And he graduated from college.
He graduated from college, and something he loves to do now is he visits schools and he talks to kids, and it's really great for them to hear his story and for him to say, you know what, reading and writing are still hard for me, but I'm a good student. Spelling is still really hard for me, but I was a good student. Don't let anybody steal your dreams, because you can be successful you're not worth any less just because you learn differently. And that's such a powerful message that our children need to hear.
Sweetie, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you.
You are my hero.
Ditto.
Bye-bye.
Bye.